We have the pleasure of welcoming Ted Rubin today to our interview series Leaders Hum. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick intro of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work with AI and automation technologies. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest. Ted Rubin is a world-renowned digital marketeer who is now the CMO of Fortify Inc. He is the author of the book, The Age of Influence, Selling to the Digitally Connected Customer. He is very well famous for his excellent social media marketing keynotes and has been listed as number 13 on Forbes' top 50 social media power influencers. He was also listed number 2 on the Lead Tail list of top 25 people most mentioned by digital marketers, a very well-known name in the digital marketing space. We are happy to welcome Ted Rubin to our Leaders Hum series. Welcome, Ted. We're thrilled to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ash. I've been looking forward to this. I know you reached out to me a little while ago. I've been thinking about it, and I'm really excited to get started. And by the way, I love when I'm called a marketeer. You know, here in the States, they say marketer, but I love marketeer because it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid and I couldn't wait to watch Disney's Mouseketeers. So it just always brings a smile to my face.
Happy to do that. And thank you so much for your time today, Ted.
So, my pleasure.
Absolutely. So I'd just like to delve into the first question that I had for you, Ted. If you could tell us a little bit about your journey so far, what was your vision when you started off in the digital marketing world?
Well, Ash, truth be told, I can't say I had a vision. I was looking for something new with a lot of potential when I discovered the emerging digital world. And I guess I was fortunate enough to see what was coming. And then, you know, truth be told, I can't really take credit for outright foresight. It's more like something I've done my whole life, listening to others and taking a cue from people that I respect or that I connect with something they're saying. And in this case, it was Seth Godin and an interview that he did in 1997. I'm not 100% certain anymore, but I think it might have been an interview with Ad Age. I've gone to look for it a few times and I haven't found it. But I was researching online and digital. I had discovered the internet. I had 2 young children. I was staying up late at night when I had free time after work, after, you know, my household duties, after being with my girls. And I was reading as much as I could because I really thought there was something happening here. And what really caught me was when I read this interview that someone did with Seth Godin. And this was before anybody really knew who Seth was. He was known in the marketing community because he was somewhat of a wonderkind at Atari as a very, very young brand manager. But he was writing about the way things were changing and the way people would be connecting. And he had a startup at the time, which was, I believe, his first startup called Yoyodyne, which was the first online direct marketing company. And I was just totally intrigued by what he was saying. And then I guess lucky for me, at the end of the interviewer said to him, you know, Seth, this sounds like a really cool company. Do you have any job openings? And he said, I don't have any specific openings right now, but there's 2 things I'm always looking for. He goes, I'm building my company by hiring smart people, no matter what they've done in the past. He goes, and I specifically need people that can sell something no one's ever sold before, because no one's ever sold these things. And literally, the bells went off. I sat there, physically raised my hand as I'm reading this going, that's me. And I immediately, I was up till about 2 a.m. I wrote back when we wrote. Remember when we typed cover letters on paper? Mm-hmm. And I typed a cover letter and my resume, and I sent it to them in the mail. And I remember my wife at the time, who is my ex-wife now for many years, but saying to me, why would you apply for a job where there are no jobs? And I'm like, because this guy is looking for me. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I got a call. And I was fortunate enough to get a job at Yoyodyne, move my family back up to New York. And I was able to, really what happened was I moved up to New York. I made a critical error. I know that we have different cultures here, but here, what I really urge people to do is never move in with your in-laws, especially if they're what we call like the Costanzas from the Seinfelds, from the show Seinfeld, who always yell at each other. The good news was, because I wanted to get out of the house every morning before they woke up, I went into Yo-Yo Nine incredibly early every morning. And lo and behold, the only other person that got there very early was Seth Godin. And he just had this brilliance coming out of him. And every morning he would hold forth on a new idea. And I was smart enough to keep my mouth shut and just listen. And when Seth first came up with the term permission marketing and was sitting there writing what was the article for Fast Company that then became the predecessor to his first best-selling book, I was there engaging with him on it. I mean, my thoughts of return on relationships started, the concept, not the actual actions, but the concept of it started sitting across from Seth and having these conversations. So that's kind of how I got started. Like I said, I wouldn't call it a vision. I'd call it more of taking a cue from people that I think are smart and then acting on it.
Wow, that is wonderful. And it's amazing that actually you listened and, just heard people talking and then kind of absorbing and, building on your own experience. And I do believe that, a lot of people, they might listen, but they're not actually hearing, what's happening. And I also do understand that you're all about relationships and you talk a lot about relationships. So if you could tell us a little bit about your first book, Return on Relationships, and that philosophy that you built around it.
Absolutely. But first, I want to react to something you just said. I love that you said people listen, but they don't actually hear. I say this all the time. I say it on stage, and every once in a while, an English major or an English lit major will say to me, no, that's not the right way. It's that you need to listen, not hear, not just hear. And I'm like, no, for me, it's like that expression, are you hearing me? And so often people do sit in a room and listen. And I have to say that I was guilty of this a lot when I was younger. And I have my mom, who passed away in 2015, was an educator. And she'd say, honey, you need to really hear what they're saying, not just take notes and listen. So I'm really glad that you broached that, because to me, it's such an important thing. But, back to your question about return on relationship, just to give a very basic definition, ROR, or return on relationship, or the hashtag I use, RONR, simply put, is the value that is accrued by a person or a brand due to nurturing a relationship. I like to say that ROI, return on investment, is simple dollars and cents, whereas ROR is the value, both perceived and real, that will accrue over time through connection, trust, loyalty, recommendations, and sharing. And for me, and I learned this early on from my parents, and especially my dad, is that it's all about relationships. My dad stressed this to me when I was young, that the relationships wasn't just about what you could get from someone now or what you could even get from them ever. He impressed upon me, do for others without expectation of anything directly in return. And as a kid, of course, you look and you go, well, what am I going to get? Because that's the way kids think, or at least that's the way they think here in the US. I think maybe everywhere. And what he really did a good job of explaining to me, and more importantly, showing me by demonstrating, is that it's not necessarily what you get back directly or from that person. It's what you build as your reputation, how people think about you. The fact that if you're always doing, people will notice it and others will do for you. And that's been a huge part of my life and my success, that people reach out and offer to do things for me. And for a while, I remember saying, why? Why? Like if someone offered to translate a lot of my blog posts into Spanish. And I'm like, well, I don't really have a budget for it. And they're like, I didn't ask to get paid. I'm like, well, why would you do that? They're like, well, I see you online doing for others every day. Why wouldn't I want to do for you? So let's just shift it a little bit into the business world, because I'm sure you have a lot of, like we talk about marketing and business, ROR, again, hashtag I use is RONR, and that's another story, which if we have time, we can get to. I consider it greater than ROI. And since ROI will match a fixed period of time, or perhaps be income related, whereas return on relationship, ROR, will have what I call a halo effect. For example, two projects can have the same ROI, whereas one was done with better relationship management. So it's added additional benefit of a satisfied customer or relationship. It's like I plus compassion. And what happens is when people are satisfied or happy, they share that. And there's a misconception, I believe, in the digital world that people complain more than they talk about good things. And I don't really believe that's true. I think a lot of people get tired of hearing people complain. But no one gets tired of hearing people say, oh my God, I had a great experience with this brand. Oh, you have to go check out this store. Oh, this restaurant was amazing. People seek out those kind of references much more so than they seek out the negative. And then, a brand that steps up its engagement game will not only protect and extend its brand and its organic reach, but also find a significant competitive advantage. We all love when someone listens to us. When your fans hear from you, their excitement will spread along with your reach and reputation, which is what I call return on relationship. Fight quantity, clutter, and filters, because we all know there's way too much content out there, with quality, content, and engagement. With every post, update, and comment, please ask yourself, is it adding something meaningful or simply adding to the noise?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think content is king, but then you need to have the quality in it. You just cannot keep spraying and praying all the time, because that would really add to the noise. And what you're saying is right. It's about the value that you're ultimately adding. And it kind of changes the way we work and the way our life revolves around content and what we are kind of getting into our systems, because there is just so much out there, so much. So how do you kind of differentiate yourself or your content? And it's very interesting in the times that we are in right now, with the recent outbreak of the coronavirus. How do you think that our way of life and work will change once we come out of the crisis? And would it make digital marketing more relevant in the mix?
Well, I need to comment on something you said, and I hope you don't mind, because I love how we see eye to eye on so much. So I agree, and I like to say content is king, but more importantly, I like to say the connection is queen, and she rules the house. Wow. In other words, creating content is important, but how you engage with people via that content is really what helps you achieve your result. And another thing I say often is that content is not necessarily king. Content that helps you achieve the result you're looking to achieve is king. So, those two kind of things go hand in hand. As far as, the coronavirus and the way of life, I believe people and companies are now being forced to experience changes many have been resisting for a long time. Remote work, truly maintaining relationships from afar, the lack of need for many offices. I believe many of these changes are now going to take hold and dramatically change the way we work and interact going forward a lot faster than they would have. I do believe it will necessarily make digital market. I don't believe that it'll necessarily make digital marketing more relevant, but I believe it will definitely make digital tools more relevant, way more important, and dramatically increase the pace of their adoption rate now and after this crisis. Like, again, we see people using Zoom dramatically. We see teachers using it. My brother's a professor at Boston University. He's never taught a remote class in his life. He was frightened of it. My brother's 65. He's a high-level professor. He's been doing this for his entire career. And now all of a sudden he's realizing that in some ways he's getting better engagement from his students remotely versus the fear he had that he wouldn't be able to connect with them, that they wouldn't feel like they were a part of the process. So I think that it's not just about where we're going to learn maybe that we can save money or we can do things differently. It's going to be about in many ways, how we can do things better. And at the very least, if my brother doesn't continue to teach remotely, which I'm sure at some point he will be back at the university, but I am certain that at least once a month, he will probably hold his classes online, either because for some reason he can't get there. He lives a few hours from where he teaches. He goes down during the week and then goes home. But more importantly, because he feels that he gets certain students who interact and engage digitally or online who did not interact and engage when they were face-to-face in the classroom.
Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then you can actually use these tools to enhance your experience and to really connect with people even remotely. And isn't that wonderful? Isn't that it's just very, very strange that, if you cannot adopt technology in these times, then you're kind of missing out on a lot, right? And I completely agree with you how we can use these tools to make our lives more productive and more enriching. And talking about social media marketing, there are a lot of startups that are still struggling to establish a brand name. So, what would be your tips that you'd give to them to help achieve their goal through social media marketing?
Well, first and foremost, I would say just do it. A buddy of mine, Brian Fanzo, likes to say, push the damn button. Which is a great way of expressing it. Get out there, share content and experiences, engage, interact, and tell people who you are via what you publish and by engaging with the content of others. And there's something that a lot of people overlook. What I just said in the second part of that sentence is it's not just about what you post, it's how you engage with others. I mean, like brands in particular, it's all about what they push out, their content, their branding, their marketing, their lead generation. Instead of, I try to tell every marketing group I work with, you have a room full of people here whose job it is to create content, which means they know how to write, they know how to think. Get them out there engaging with others, engage with your customers' content, engage with your competition's content. It's so important to understand that it's not just about it's not just about what you publish on your own. Publishing is also how you engage and interact with others. Now, I'll tell you a little secret. The vast majority of my content doesn't come from me sitting in a room saying, oh my God, I've got a brilliant idea and I'm going to write about it. It comes from me reading things other people are posting and reacting to it. Whether it's a positive reaction like, oh my God, that's brilliant and I want to extend on it or just agree with it, or, oh my God, that's so wrong. This is how I think it should be done. Or I don't agree with it and I think it should be shape shifted or changed a little bit. And then I start writing as a reaction to what I'm reading and what I'm engaging with. And this, especially when it comes to personal branding or small business branding, start reading other people's content. Look at what your competition is writing. Look at what your neighbors and other business people in the community are writing about, and then start communicating and engaging with them with your content in ways that matter. People want to know who you are now, especially now, more than ever. At Photify, we've taken the lead here by trying to provide an easy-to-use tools for personalizing and branding content. So even when shared by other people who see it and know who the source was, start thinking about, and this is so important, telling your story in a way people will care. And not just thinking about it, but experimenting in all different ways and watching and reacting to what works and what doesn't work in this respect.
Wow, that is a very, very, interesting take that you have, and it's a lot of learning that I think our viewers will also benefit from, because what we also see is, we as a company also, we're trying to kind of get our content out, and then we're kind of struggling. Oh, we don't have engagement, and we're looking at stats, and we're just really frustrated. So I would say engagement would actually be key rather than, just creating content and just putting out there. And that's very, very insightful. Thank you for that. And I also want to know, what's your opinion on what is termed as, the future of work? And given the current scenario, do you think we've already moved to the future, or what is the future of digital marketing?
There will be so many futures that it's important to understand which future we're referring to. I believe, like we discussed a bit earlier, that what was the more distant future has now expedited dramatically. I believe a great deal of offices, as soon as their leases expire, will go away. I can attest to the fact that Photify will most definitely move to a fully remote workforce after this is all said and done and after our lease ends. Who needs an office when we've discovered we can not only work effectively without one, but that actually many of us are accomplishing more, not less. And I know this is not just us, because I've been talking every day to people all over the country, and a lot of people are tremendously surprised that how effective people can be without being watched over, without being next to each other, even in a way that, people think that when you're home, you're you're looking at everything. You're abstracted by other things that are going on. The phone rings, your kids start screaming. But what people are finding is that when people are at home, they can get more accomplished. They don't have to do other things from afar. They don't have to travel every day. Just think about the commuting time that's saved. And we have found particularly that we're engaging better with each other. We're listening better to each other because it's not just nods across the room. And we're actually getting more done than we did when we had an office. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. I also think you're going to see a lot of companies using tools like Zoom more, using other tools like that, understanding that everyone doesn't have to be in the same room. And I also believe the telephone is going to have a resurgence. Actually picking up the phone and hearing somebody's voice. I have a thing I do when I'm on stage. Very often I hold up my iPhone and I say to the audience, what is this? And everyone, shouts out phone, iPhone. And I go, well, what's the biggest word in iPhone? And always people go, I. And I have to look at them. I laugh. I go, it's not about you. Actually, the biggest word is phone, because this phone comes with something that most of you guys are not even aware of. We all have apps on our phones, and I'm sure everybody in the audience has apps on their phones. But what they forget is that every one of these phones comes pre-installed with an app that has 0 to 9, 10 different digits on it. And if you press a certain number of them, you can actually hear somebody's voice. It's remarkable. You don't have to use emoticons to express emotion. You can laugh, you can shout, you can whisper, you can cry, and people know it. And right now, I don't know about you, but I'm getting phone calls all day long because people are seeking that connection. And then all of a sudden they're figuring out how much they can get done. I can't tell you how many times when I've been in companies, Collective Bias is a great example, the company that John Andrews and I built and got acquired in 2016, that was a predecessor in our content marketing thinking to Photify. That there would be 30 emails going back and forth, trying to solve a problem. And I'd pick up the phone and in literally 1 minute phone call, it would all be resolved. Because there weren't 20 people going back and forth, trying to figure out something instead of just asking the right person the right question. So I think we're also going to see a big resurgence in some of the old technologies like the telephone. And we all know that most millennials or younger, Gen Z especially and younger, like they don't pick up the phone. I mean, I don't know about what happens by you, but like I like to tell a joke, like, do you ever try to call your kids? You'll immediately get a text back that says, what? With an exclamation point. And that's their way of saying, I don't pick up the phone. But that's changing because even kids are picking up the phone now because they're seeking connection. And I think that and other tools are just going to really change the landscape for a lot of us.
I so absolutely agree with you, Ted. I mean, I can type, I can go on for 5-10 minutes just typing, but I can just pick up the phone and resolve it in 1 minute. And
right.
Absolutely. And, tools like Slack and, you're just typing the entire day and then your fingers are so tired. Hey, just call me. I'm just available on the call. And you know what? Now it's free. Everything's free of cost. And that makes a very, very big difference. And that's amazing how you think like that. That's very important for, the newer generations to kind of understand. And talking about newer generations, how do you think the engagement of millennials and Gen Z workforce on social media platforms are changing with time? And how do you craft a strategy for digital media across generations that kind of, it connects with all kinds of people? How do you do that?
Well, truth be told, I can't say this is something that I really specialize in or know a lot about, other than to say I believe we're all human and crave the same things. A lot has been made of different generations. For the most part, I believe it's more about environment than genetics, and that it's about what we experience. So, Gen Z, millennials, they grew up differently. They experienced different tools that we didn't have access to, or I shouldn't say we, because I'm sure we're a very different age group, but when I say we, I mean we baby boomers. So like I've said before, try different things, experiment and pay attention. And then I like to say drive a truck through what works and keep on doing so until it stops working. And I think, just like we discussed, with what you asked me right before this, is I think some of this is just going to shift a little bit because a lot of different generations now are starting to recognize more of the value of a phone call. the value of connecting with someone. My business partner, John Andrews, has always driven this home to me. He desperately seeks voice connection, and he makes a habit of connecting with people regularly. Now he's doing it a little differently now because he's not driving, but what he's done for years is John has always driven to work. When I first started working with him, our company Collective Bias was based in Bentonville, Arkansas, so very different than a city environment. Now Photify is based in Raleigh. So John always drove to work, and every morning when he drives to work and when he drives home later, he calls people every day, and the first words out of his mouth is, "Hey, good morning. What is there that I can do for you today?" And, sometimes people have time to talk, other times they don't, but he connects with people in a very human way. And, although, I talk about return relationship and connecting with people, I, like a lot of people, I had a little resistance to the phone. You get caught on it. You have to be on it too long. I don't love talking on the phone for a long period of time, although I do recognize how you can get things much more efficiently done. But John's always, driven me and influenced me to pick up the phone and call people like that. And I think that a lot of people now, again, with what's happening and with the separation people are having with social distancing, they're seeing that value. And I believe Gen Z and millennials are seeing it too. So I think that's going to be a big thing. And then incredibly important, which I think so many companies don't do with whatever demographic they're trying to approach. And I like to say we need to move from a world of targeting to matchmaking, because targeting is having a target and hitting something and moving on, and nobody likes to be the target of something, but matchmaking is bringing things together that work. Is ask them. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've been in big marketing meetings, mostly at ad agencies, where they're talking about selling to a group that isn't even present in the room. And then there's people, who consider themselves the experts, saying, "Oh, I wouldn't buy that." Or I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room where 45-year-old men are talking about things that nobody would buy when we're trying to sell it to 25-year-old women. Why aren't there 25-year-old women from Middle America, who is your target demographic? Why are they not in the room? Because you're thinking of it as a target instead of a match. When you're thinking of a match, you want an opinion. You want to know how they feel. So when it comes to millennials and Gen Z and how things are going to change and how do you craft a strategy, ask them.
Absolutely. That is indeed very insightful. I think a lot of people, kind of just forget to ask questions and they just assume things, and that's where there is a big gap and there's a big disconnect. But you're right, it's about asking questions. Just ask them. That is amazing.
But I also want to say something. Don't do it as a survey. Don't do it as an official session in a room. Have a conversation. Because that's when you get real answers. When you ask someone a part of a survey or in a focus group, it's presented. First of all, they usually get the information in advance. They sit to think about it. They think, what answer does this person want to hear? Rather than in the form of a conversation where you get information about the way people are thinking and living. I tell every group, stop worrying about just coming to your page and go to theirs. Start seeing what they're talking about. Make every person in your marketing department required every morning or throughout the day to go to at least 10 pages of your customer's social media presence and see what they're talking about. See the remarks they're making when they're not necessarily answering your question or conversing with you. There is so much information out there that you can get in its natural environment where you're seeing really how people think that everybody is overlooking.
Absolutely. I love how you kind of bring that up. It's about, conversing and not really saying what the other person wants to hear because you're just not being genuine.
Right.
I love that thought, Thank you so much for that. And just lastly, any other important sound bites that you'd like to leave our viewers with?
Well, clearly you've been following me because you know that I love sound bites. And I do have a lot of things that I think are important and things I'd love for people to take away. The first one that's very relevant to a lot of what we talked about here, and again, especially in this environment, because I think brands are so busy worrying about what they're going to sell right now that so many are insulting people. At a time when, don't try to sell me a car. Where am I driving? I'm being told to stay home. Don't solicit me to come into your medical practice when you should be saying to me, stay home, you shouldn't be here unless you have an essential service that's needed. So I'd like to say that a brand is what a business or a person does, but a reputation is what people remember and share. Please take this to heart. Just like I was talking about when my dad used to have me, do things for the neighbors, or we would drive through a neighborhood and there'd be garbage cans in the middle of the street. We didn't know anybody there, but he'd get out of the car and put those garbage cans back where they should be. And I remember asking him, why are you doing that? He goes, because it's the right thing to do. And wouldn't you want someone to do that for us? And of course, as soon as I was old enough, I was the one that had to get out of the car and move them. But it taught me a valuable lesson. And he'd say to me, this is how people come to know who you are and what's important to you. And then something else that wraps into that is that a network gives you reach, but a community gives you power. So, we all talk about networking, and for years, I always considered myself a networker. Everywhere I went, I met people, I reached out, I built new relationships. But what I learned over time, where my real strength came from, and somebody said this to me, they said, you're not just a networker, you're a community builder. All my friends know each other. They live, I don't know if you remember back when Google had circles, and you had all these different communities you were part of, but some of them overlapped. And I bring people together, and it's important for other people and businesses to do that too. But you'll learn that when you build a community and you support that community, that gives you power. I like to say that networks connect, but communities care. And then again, leading into, my favorite line, which are relationships are like muscle tissue. The more you engage them, the stronger and more valuable they become. Exercise those relationship muscles. Now is the perfect time. Everybody right now has a little extra time on their hands. Use that time to reach out, to engage, to let people know you care, to say to people, what can I do to support you today? And then most important, to wrap this all up, and you can see it right here, is be good to people. It makes a difference. It will, especially now, and it always will. And again, it leads into that relationship building, communities, and what your reputation is.
Oh, I think that hit home, Ted. That was wonderful. And I think, people will really, really, have benefits out of what you said. It's about engaging, it's about communities, and not just about networking. It's just beautiful how you put it, So it was really, really wonderful. It was a pleasure talking to you, Ted. I really appreciate your time and sharing your views with us. It's really been a learning experience for me personally, and surely would be for our viewers too. So thank you so much.
Well, Ash, thank you. I have to say that I do this somewhat frequently, and you are very skilled. You do a great job. You make your interviewee feel comfortable. You ask really intelligent questions, and I love your commentary after each one. So thank you very much.
Oh, that means a lot to me, Ted. I will definitely stay in touch with you, and I really hope to do this often. We can, probably do this whenever you're free another time. I'd really love to have a conversation with you.
I'd love to do it again too. And remember, be good to people.
To people, absolutely.